Okay, so the title for the talk tonight is Finding Ease in Meditation. And this is a very big topic. The wisdom about hindrances and obstacles in this very simple practice is very large. There's a lot written. There are many lists, numbers of obstacles, numbers of hindrances, numbers of antidotes to obstacles. And rather than go into a list-driven talk, I would like to address this as it has been happening with you in your own practices and what has happened tonight. And then we'll cover as much as we get to as far as what people's experiences are. So far today, we just did a very simple practice of feeling the breath and resting the body and the mind with a little talk to begin about having a sense of kindness toward ourselves, to allow ourselves to simply rest without engaging in a lot of work and effort and correction. How did that go tonight for you? Take a mic. We're going to take the mic. I want to let you know, by the way, that these talks do get published to YouTube right away. The camera stays on me, for better or worse, but your voices do get recorded. So bear that in mind in case you are concerned about anything like that. But go ahead.
No, for me, I meditate every day, typically twice a day. So this was nothing particularly special tonight. I like what you said about bring a feeling of kindness to yourself and to maybe the world at large. But for me, it's I guess depending a little bit on the mood, on how much stress there is in your life at the time. But there is always a bit of a struggle between focusing on the moment but also letting go, and just letting your body as it normally does, its breathing and everything. And so there is always a bit of a zone to define sometimes that is a bit tricky sometimes for me.
So what is it about, you use the words focusing on the moment. What does focusing involve?
For me, it's not fighting the thoughts or whatever your mind takes you, but it's being aware of the whole thing, but it's not always easy. And
what makes it difficult?
As you said, maybe that's why you talk about keeping your eyes open. What's a way to fall a bit, falling a little bit asleep, not completely asleep, but in a down moment type of thing.
So you find that you get a little drowsy and you start to fall away a bit.
Or I lose my focus. So it's always like I don't want to force myself to fight it too hard. So there is a bit of a balance of attitude to be had, which is, once again, depending on the mood, depending on how much there is going on in your life and everything. But for me, that's just the dosage of this contradictory attitudes almost.
Yeah, and that's really the base, the kernel of what we want to talk about tonight is how is it that being present seems to require effort and exertion, and what's the quality of that work? How is that engaged in, and what does it get us? It sounds like you're saying that in order to remain present with the sensations of the breath, it requires some effort.
Yes.
What are you doing with that effort? What is it getting you? Is it simply fighting against the drowsiness that you're talking about?
Drowsiness, not so much, but it's just fighting about not being there, not being as present as you could be. I've done meditation for 10 years. I have done Vipassana and different techniques, and I self-taught myself. I know some people who do it. I travel in Eastern countries where it's done, and everybody has a bit of a different attitude. And I brought some of my friends to meditation, and I know how to talk about it, but it's not so easy to apply
Right.
after 10 years or so. It's
Sure.
Still
Sure.
and sometimes maybe you expect too much. So there is always this contradictory type of facets of your personality that show up.
And this is a good example of someone who has practiced with some diligence and with some instruction over the years. We don't really get to so easily drop our habitual patterns of wanting to improve, wanting to exert effort in order to control our experience and make it better. You know, what this practice calls us to do is to let go of the effort, let go of the exertion, and what is then remains. What remains? That's the discovery. What remains when the evaluation of my state and a decision that this is not as focused as it should be, and therefore I need to push. When that happens within practice, that is thinking. That is just thinking. It's a habitual pattern of thinking. And one of the things that happens in our practice is that thinking around like a quality control kind of idea, we tend to entertain that kind of thinking as though it was needed. But actually it's not. All we need to do is rest. And if we notice that we're thinking, we feel the breath. Sometimes teaching can get in the way of this, knowing so much, having heard so much about what is it like to really rest. And then we think we need to exert control so that we achieve that state of rest. So it becomes we think that what we are tasked to do is to exert ourselves appropriately so that we can reach some state.
It's a mistake, yes.
Well, it's unnecessary.
Right.
That's one ways of putting it. It's thinking. It's in the course of practice, while we are meditating, it is unnecessary. It's important after practice to engage in evaluation and wonder, what am I doing? You know, after 10 years, one would hope things have changed a bit. You know, me, it's been longer. One would hope, you know, and I want to be able to notice that I am less, for example, what kind of change do I look for? It's not the change I look for during practice time, because practice time is not about self-assessment. Practice time is about just sitting and being present. But I want to find that I am more free of domination by my own feelings of judgment about myself, about strong emotions of anger and jealousy and hatred and also attraction and desire. And it's not that those emotions don't occur, but they cease to be things that drive my behavior. They don't dominate me. They become things that occur, just like other things occur in the world. So the contradiction that you're bringing up, but there's a matter of timing that's important. Assessment is important, and you want to be able to notice what's going on here. If I've meditated for all these years, things ought to be different. If they're not different, I may have missed the point, you know. And that is very well worth doing with respect to the reading in the Dharma about these questions. Study, hearing teachings, talking to people who are teachers who have their own realization and a way of giving guidance. But during practice, that's not the job. And it's very easy for us to be fooled into thinking that that kind of exertion is actually needed in order to do simple practice, this mindfulness, this shamatha that we're talking about, where I'm simply present and feeling my breath. And when I notice that I'm thinking, I feel the breath. That's the only practice there is. Has anyone else noticed anything like that or something different? Yeah. You're next. Go ahead.
I guess I was having some anxiety come up during the meditation, which I think was just sort of left over from a conversation I had had like right before I came in here. So, but I felt like it didn't completely take over, which is good. But it's sometimes hard to know like how much time do I need to spend to get myself, and I guess I don't necessarily have to spend extra time to get myself out of a mode that I was in before.
Oh, I see.
I just felt very anxious about,
something
the conversation that I had. Yeah.
And you found that anxiety lingered in, or did you also find that you were reliving the experience, the conversation? Were you chewing on it a bit?
I don't think I was even thinking about the conversation as much, but it's my guess that the anxiety was coming from that. I was feeling anxiety about other stuff, like, if there was a sound in the room, I felt anxiety, but I think I was just in an anxious
state. That one loud
state.
one that happened? Is that one that you noticed? I noticed that too. Everybody did. Everybody wrote a little. Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm just not sure. I mean, because stuff happens in life where...
Sure. And if we needed to wait until we had no anxiety or fear before we meditated properly, we'd be waiting a long time, and this would not be very useful. So what you want to do is, it sounds like you dealt with it in some way. You noticed that you were feeling anxious, and then what did you do?
I think I just tried to let it go this time. I mean, it wasn't too much, but it came back a few times.
What way? What manner of? How did you let it go?
Well, I noticed each time that my breath had changed, actually. So that was maybe a judgment that I didn't need to do. That I noticed that, but my breath would catch a little bit when I was feeling it. Yeah.
So you noticed your breath was getting a little more short.
Yeah.
Because you were anxious.
Mm-hmm.
And what did you do in order to let it go? Did you engage in some?
I think when I focus on the breath, it naturally seems to lengthen, but I don't know how much of it is me trying to do that. So.
Yeah, you don't need to manipulate the breath in particular. The breath can be, particularly with anxiety, sometimes the breath can be a little problematic depending on what your history with anxiety is. Just as you described, when we feel anxious, our breath tends to shorten. If you have a history of a lot of anxiety attacks, panic attacks, more severe episodes of that kind.
No, but...
Yeah. But if you do, or if just in the run-of-the-mill anxiety, you notice that kind of shortening of breath, sometimes feeling the breath while the breath is shortened in anxiety can sort of accentuate it. It's like, oh, I know what this is. I'm anxious now. I really am anxious. Now I'm anxious, and I get even shorter. It's useful to be flexible when you're in a position where you are having some strong emotions, and take advantage of another object of mindfulness, for example. It doesn't need to be the breath. So here we are. We're sitting in this room. Our whole body is alive and awake. All our senses are functioning. And you can, instead of placing your attention on an anxious breath, you can place your attention on the sounds and just hear the sounds that are happening, for example. Sometimes that can be easier when there's some intensity happening in the body. Sure.
Concentrate on the sounds of the breath or just on the sounds?
The ambient sounds that are happening around. Yeah. And, it's concentrating isn't really needed because it's all just happening. Our ears are wide open and the sounds are coming in. And so we can just notice them. The advantage of choosing an object of mindfulness, an object of meditation, a sensory object, like the breath or the sounds or the body, the feeling of the body in the chair or in the cushion, is that when you notice that you're thinking, you decide in advance what you're going to do. You set it up. I'm going to feel the breath, and if I notice that I'm thinking and I'm engaged in worries or thoughts, I feel the breath. But once you feel the breath, you're in the present. All these sensations are happening. Nothing needs to be excluded. And so that kind of openness of the experience of being present with your sensations can also help with the feelings of anxiety. So you didn't notice a story going on. You weren't noticing.
Maybe I'm avoiding it.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Anyone else? Oh yeah, you had your hand up before.
Yeah, there was a lot of intensity within the body that at first I was like fighting about, and I was coming up with excuses to. Oh,
It's all right. It's on.
I was coming up with excuses to fight that feeling until then you said something about the cushion supports you, and I let go, and the back pain started to ease up a little bit, and I started to cry. Because there was a situation I was going through, I guess recently, but particularly today, that was rather tough. And I just sat there, breathed. I'm like, okay, you're crying. It's okay. Keep breathing, keep breathing. And then sudden good ideas kept coming, and I was like getting enamored with my own ideas. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a good plan. That's a really good thought. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, breathe. And then noticing the body tensing up again, and there's just like rumbling throughout, like the body was kind of shaking, and then more crying. And then some really good, like money calculations. All right, you spend your money here, you do that, and it's like these emotions were kind of blocking out thoughts or plans of action that I had to take to address the situation, because I was holding on to these intense feelings and I couldn't see clearly what I had to do.
Uh-huh. So the dam burst.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you discovered that you were holding a lot of strong tension in your body, right? Mm-hmm. You hadn't known that before.
I know it's there, but I guess it's kind of scary or frightening how much is in there.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I thought I did this.
Yeah, took care of all that already, right? Yeah.
Like I should know better. It's like you're still hurt.
Yeah. Have you done much meditation?
Yeah, about 3 years.
Uh-huh.
But I'm relatively new to this shamatha practice, about 3 weeks.
Okay. Yeah, this what you're describing is a real. I certainly identify with it. I certainly know what that's like, and it shows that habitually we engage in a tremendous effort. That's part of our suffering. That we are trying really hard to keep it together, as though if we didn't, it would really fall apart somehow, blow up, and it would be a big mess. Protecting ourselves against some disintegration, And we exert an enormous amount of effort, moment by moment. Part of what can be discovered here in this practice is that effort. is how much there is. And you know, the first noble truth is the truth of suffering. And when I first heard that, I thought, I don't need anybody to be telling me about that, you know, this I know. Why even number that one, you know? But the fact is, I had no idea how I was suffering. I still am discovering it. And the sense that you had of discovering this in the course of this brief practice, of what kind of exertion and tightness and you know, sort of suffocation was going on, is really part of what we discover in this practice. So when I say, as a topic, finding ease in meditation, you find lots of things, you know? I think finding ease is a good description for what you described, but, you know, a degree of ease, obviously. I mean, I'm not done either. But it's not the same as like a morphine drip where you're just gonna like feel just great instantly. Finding ease involves discovering your suffering and finding it acutely often, so that then it can release and you can notice what it is before and after. That's an important point about this. You know, sometimes people come to meditation with an idea that what I want is to be calm and peaceful. And, well, you know, we use those kind of words too. But if you try to maneuver yourself into calm and peaceful, you know, the most you'll get is whatever your suffering mind thinks is calm and peaceful, which may not be anywhere near close what could be, you know. So that was a useful experience for you, and you found yourself very much engaged in lots of thinking afterwards, I mean, while it was going on. Did it feel pressured?
How the thinking?
Yeah.
No, it felt just kind of calming. It was like, all right, this is like, it was like clarity. It's like action. It's like, okay, you got to do this, do that. And then I would like caught myself and like, you know, did a slap on the wrist. You know,
yeah.
Like a little bit of that judgment, but not too bad.
Yeah, yeah. So the thing about, you know, that slap is also not needed. Just know it's not needed. There's no need at all. All you need, that's part of this whole effortful, like, we want to replace one domination with another, you know, so that we, you know, we're tired and unhappy with this domination that's been happening for all these years. So I want to find a proper hammer to apply, you know, so that things get beaten into proper shape. The urge is very I mean, it's my saying it's not necessary won't stop it from happening. It continues to happen. You just want to notice that it happens, and you want to know that it's not needed. There's no need for any harshness. Harshness is just another one of these habitual exertions that is really never helps. The world is harsh enough. The events of life, you know, all of that. There's no need for it in ourselves. But also the thing to know is that it sounds like you were asserting the technique and you're trying to be true to your plan to meditate now, right? You found yourself thinking, and even though it felt like productive thoughts, you were saying to yourself, or you were recalling that I'm doing something else now. I'm meditating now. And I think that's a proper impulse, and that we need to, particularly in the early stages, by which I mean the first 10 or 20 years, to remind ourselves at times, what the technique is, what we're doing here, what is this about. That's why Eyes Open helps. I really think it really does help, because at least like, I'm not in Tahiti, or I'm not in like some childhood embarrassment. I'm actually in this room, and it helps to support the fact that I'm doing something for a reason and I've chosen it, And the thing that you can be confident about is that you won't lose anything by doing that. All these thoughts, this problem solving, the solutions, you don't have to worry about losing them. You'll have them when you're done. Some people feel like, oh my God, I finally got a breakthrough, I got to write it all down and all of that stuff. It's already in there, it's already there. You don't have to worry. What were you going to say?
I was gonna say that, like that good idea I had. I have no clue what it is. I can't remember now, but I'm like, if I need it, it'll come back.
Yeah. If you're not so tight, it'll come back. So one of the things that can be helpful is at the after practice is to notice the state of the body. And notice, where are you? Where am I with my body? Do I feel a greater sense of ease? This isn't just about looking for all the trouble and highlighting it and, finding the trouble. This is about finding the ease too, finding the rest. What is it like when I'm done? And it is always a good idea when doing practice to find from your own experience in your own state how long you should practice and stick to it. You don't want to practice to the point where you're exhausting yourself or you are driving yourself into an endurance event. It's best to stop practice when you at a point where it feels like a good idea to do it the next time. You don't want to run yourself into the hole. Does anyone else have thoughts about today's practice? Yes.
Well, hello?
Yep.
Okay. Have generally experience a lot of sustained anxiety. However, recently, less than the last week, that anxiety has subsided somewhat. And I've been experiencing periods of more relaxation and so on. So that my expectation was that, oh great, this is going to reinforce that, But instead, when I sat down, I immediately started to become anxious. And it felt like, very much like resistance.
Mm-hmm.
Or somewhat more colorfully, I actually started to have an image of myself as a vampire being shown across and reacting and responding to that. That did subside somewhat afterwards, but not completely. And as I said, it was surprise, but I also did my best to own that resistance. I don't know, although I have obsessed about it for many years, what I'm anxious about necessarily. I mean, I've developed a long line of theories over time. And I spend endless amounts of time and energy trying to identify the source, the core. And then you mentioned one word. I don't remember, but it was something like dissolution, let's say. I know it wasn't that, but that feel things crumbling. But I immediately substituted another word, which felt more appropriate to me, that I had not all of this time thought of, and that word was annihilation.
Mm-hmm.
And I tend to feel that that is what I have been afraid of.
Uh-huh.
Because I'm a creative person with an extremely vivid imagination, and I have extensive resources of inventing things, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Things to fill space, things to worry about, you know, those kinds of things.
The sense of annihilation, is it more acute in the course of practice?
Not necessarily. I mean, it's present,
Uh-huh.
but the acuteness comes outside of a practice situation.
Uh-huh.
Like often when I wake up in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
so on. And lately, it's just, you know, it kind of comes up.
Yeah.
I'm beginning to let go of the effort to get rid of it,
Mm-hmm.
because I did realize that that's kind of approaching things the wrong way around,
Mm-hmm.
upside down, if you will. You know,
Right.
trying to get rid of rather than to, you know, take in.
Yeah. And you
But-
do get yourself, I mean, you do demonize it, though,
Oh,
very
absolutely.
vividly as into
Absolutely.
vampire form.
I
and-
demonize it and
yeah.
I reify it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just want to say that this was an extremely significant moment, because it feels right to me that
Uh-huh.
I'm afraid of, you know, of annihilation,
Yeah.
which I do understand is what it's all about.
What is what all about?
The practice
Yeah.
and the path.
Yeah.
The path.
There's really something to that. You
Yes.
know,
Oh.
annihilation is in store for us all.
Yeah, exactly.
And it can be understood in different ways.
Uh-huh.
One is this sense of self, this very complex, poorly examined but obsessively examined
Mhm.
sense of self, ego, also called ego. It doesn't have much to it, really. It's rather insubstantial. And in practice, one begins to get closer to that truth. And it can feel sometimes like really bad news.
It's very threatening.
Yeah,
It's
it
very
could be.
threatening.
The ego is threatened.
But I have
Yeah.
to say, because of that one word, I have to thank you for having mentioned that word right now. I do not feel threatened by that
Mhm.
in this moment, because it's like I've named the beast. In a
Uh-huh.
way, if you know what I mean.
Hmm.
So I thank you that.
You're welcome.
Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. The way that it becomes, from my own experience, when the mind becomes more spacious and there's lots of room for my experience and the present moment and all these feelings, the anxiety, the physical tension, and the memories and the vampires and all the rest, when there's lots of room, then, you know, annihilation itself, in the terms that we're giving, in terms of, you know, ego, death, there's room for that too, without it seeming like the end.
Uh-huh.
There's room for that too.
So it's not instead of.
Right. Yeah.
Instead of.
It happens in your mind.
It's along with.
Yeah.
Yes, I think
Yeah.
that's just-
There's room for all of
yeah,
it.
that's very helpful also.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Are there any other? Do you have any comments or questions about your practice today? Yeah.
No, I don't.
You don't? Okay. Good. No, it's all right. He said no. Anyone else would like to? We have time for a little bit more. Sure, John.
I guess lately in my practice, I've been impressed with the very beginning instruction, which is that there are no good thoughts, there are no bad thoughts, no holy thoughts, no profane thoughts, no profound thoughts, no trivial thoughts. And they're all just thoughts. And that the thoughts which are my demons and cause me fear or unhappiness or depression, that I, in my practice, to the extent that I can label them and let go of them and come back to something very simple like the sensation of the breath going out into the space, I achieve freedom from them. And that actually freedom from them. And that I feel that it's a shift of loyalty on my part from the content of the thoughts, which is usually about the past and the future. Always, it is. And, regrets and sorrows about the past and fears and hopes for the future, as opposed to coming back to this open awareness in the present moment as being what is actually real. And I've been reading the biography of Marpa, the translator, recently, and how he emphasizes his realization as being the realization that what arises in the present moment is both an open dimension and it's what's actually real, as opposed to the thoughts. And so I alternate in my life between getting caught up in these thoughts, and which can result in depression and sorrow and fear and all kinds of bad states, and then practicing and coming back to the present, and they evaporate, they disappear. Now, if I come back to the present as a way of avoiding those thoughts, it doesn't work as well. So I have to keep reminding myself that the point is actually not to get somewhere, but to simply be aware of whatever is happening, including thoughts. Awareness, that helps. And yet, the tendency to try and get somewhere constantly sneaks in. It's so sneaky and subtle, and it always undermines the practice, and taints it, because then suddenly there's ego again, and the sense of me, and worrying about me, and how am I doing, and then sooner or later I'm back in those thoughts again. So this is the practice, for me, is this. It's a matter of finding the way to let go of ambition and self-improvement, and to simply, I keep thinking of Trungpa Rinpoche saying, shift one's loyalty. From, he said, from samsara to nirvana. And the way I understand that is from these stories that I tell myself, my thoughts, which are so habitual, to just waking up, coming back, again and again. Anyhow, that's that's my practice these days. That's a snapshot.
And that's another thing I think that fits people's experience here today, that there is something about the nature of our thoughts that is that they carry with them a sense of validity, that they have in themselves this sense of trueness in the moment of our experience of the thought. But then that thought goes, and that thought goes, and another one comes. That may be completely contradictory.
That has that same sense of truth.
Exactly. It has this trueness. And that is why this has been described, our awake state, part of a way of characterizing our suffering is that our awake state is dreamlike. We are like in a dream. We have anxieties that have no basis. They come and they go. They are not related to this moment, but still they're here, and they tighten our bodies so that we're in pain. And we are so gripped with the urgency of it. And then they can simply be gone, and without too much time, be replaced by something else that's equally gripping or more.
But by trueness, do you mean credibility? That we
It seems real, it seems right. Yeah,
gain credibility to our thoughts?
that's right. We think that they are right, and particularly around strong emotion. It's like there's no arguing with strong emotion when it dominates, but then it's over. That's the thing. So one of the great teachings of this practice is that you recognize that this really changes, that these thoughts come and go. Even the ones that are gripping and dominate, and maybe 5 minutes goes by, they're gone. Then they're gone. Yeah.
And I find that that's sort of one side of it. And the flip side is that the awareness of the present moment is true.
Yeah.
And that the others and the thoughts are all fictions.
Yeah.
And that in the awareness of the present moment, it's really odd that it's somehow I is gone. I mean, it's like just it doesn't have any relevance.
It's part of the dream. And so the operative process here is to wake up. It doesn't involve, and you know what a dream life is like. When you're in the middle of a dream and there's sleep, it really is important, and it is really, and there's problems to be solved, and there's a lot to do, and it matters whether you solve them or not, if it's a bad dream, which is what I mainly have. When I remember them, I don't remember the good ones too often. So, but then we actually do wake up, and it all dissolves. And that is not a metaphor. The teachings that I have is that is not a metaphor for our waking suffering. That is veridical. That is just the same. That we live inside of these thoughts and conceptual world as though they were real, and they're not. They have an arbitrary quality. They're related in many ways to events and reality, but they have an arbitrary quality, and they are not. They have no
and then they're gone.
reality on their own side.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're so seductive
Yep.
and powerful, and then they're gone.
Yep.
I mean, it's really, like somehow it's just it's cheap. It's
Something
crappy.
that
It's
helped
like a
me.
seduction,
Something that helped me when I started practicing was this idea, because I don't know, I had lots of change in my house, money, coins, and I thought, thoughts are the pennies of the mind. They're just all over the place, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, the buckets full of them. It wouldn't matter how many buckets you had, they'd be full of pennies, because you don't want to do anything with them, but they seem so valuable, but then they're not. They're just not. So waking up is the point. I agree. Okay, I think we're done with our time. And thanks everyone for helping drive the talk with your revealing your experiences. That can sometimes be uncomfortable, and I appreciate it. So we'll just end with I'm just going to describe a traditional Buddhist practice, which is called many things, but one of them is dedicating the merit. And so this is a contemplation for us. I just want to acknowledge the fact that this effort that I have been engaged in this practice and in this study, and learning not to exert so much effort, has had has been motivated by an aspiration to reduce my suffering and to help others, if only because by my suffering less, everyone around me is guaranteed to suffer less. The subway, the deli, everywhere. Just the passing look on the street. So, this becomes dedicated now to both my well-being and the well-being of all those around me. And that's the end. Thank you. So join us now for our refreshments.